Hi everybody, thanks for tuning in again. This is Chris with Laurel City Historical Fencing. I wanted to first start off with just a quick apology. I know we were really good about putting videos out nearly every week. I think there were some weeks where we had 2 out, some weeks where maybe we didn't have any, but it's been a little while. We have a few other videos that I haven't had a chance to edit yet, but we're in Connecticut and it's winter. And we usually film outside, so we might not be able to film any techniques really until we find some sort of indoor place where we can really shoot and set things up. Right now we just don't have a place a studio area big enough to record longsword or poleaxe or spear footage. So we might do a few more of this kind of thing where instead of demonstrating techniques, I'm going to talk a little bit more on theory. Now today I wanted to talk about self-defense and HEMA, historic European martial arts. And I know if you watch a lot of HEMA videos online, you probably have seen one within the last week or so, right around Christmas, with Scala Grimm, talking about the same thing, talking about how HEMA can be used as a self-defense, how it can't, how it doesn't work, how it does work. I will say that it's more coincidence that I was thinking about that. This ratty piece of paper here with my notes on it is, it's been sitting in my lunchbox for work for a couple weeks now, and I just keep forgetting to actually record anything with this, or when I do remember, I don't have time, but anyway. So I think I tend to agree with him on some of the issues. Yeah, talking about historic European martial arts in a self-defense context. Now let me say that when I'm talking about it, I'm specifically talking about the medieval systems. Some of the later systems, like Bartitsu, which are classified as HEMA, really are designed more for a maybe not entirely modern, but a little more of a modern self-defense concept. But yeah, when we talk about some of the medieval stuff, a lot of people just automatically will just say, oh, well, that really isn't used anymore. We don't carry swords around with us. We don't walk around with big daggers. We're not wearing full plate armor, so none of this stuff really counts anymore. And partly I do agree. Some of the aspects of it really don't apply to modern self-defense. I'm not going to get attacked by somebody in full plate, and I'm not going to use some of those techniques against them. But some stuff does still apply. So in terms of functionality, I honestly say HEMA in a lot of the traditional schools are very similar to a lot of Eastern martial arts, a lot of the Taekwondo, Kempo Karate, Kung Fu schools, that there are some of these forms, some of these practice drills where someone comes in at you with a very straight stab, and it is a hard defense and a counter strike, and it's all very simple, and it's all just very traditionally done in the system of the way it's always been done, and one instructor does it, so the next instructor repeats it, and the next instructor repeats it. But those are only so effective in actual self-defense. It is very rare that someone just comes at you with a knife and stands there and waits for you to get in guard and waits for you to be in the right position and stabs in a single trajectory at your belly or at your face, or someone takes one of these very exaggerated punches at your head that you're ready for. So a lot of times, not just for HEMA, but for most martial arts, the actual drills we do in a class setting aren't realistic scenarios for what is actually going to happen. If you get into a bar fight, if you get mugged, any of these kinds of situations where you might get into some sort of self-defense scenario. But of course, some of the techniques that we have in medieval times do still apply. Obviously, longsword is not something you're going to be using. Poleaxe is not something you're probably going to be using. But the principles of wrestling or dagger still apply. Joints only bend so far in any direction, and over the last so many millennia, those haven't changed on people. So putting someone into certain headlocks, a figure four, elbow to the balance, just a standard chicken wing, any of these kinds of things, they worked back then, they worked in ancient Greece, they worked in medieval Germany, they work today. So any of the kind of training you do with wrestling and dagger can still apply. Now, obviously, most of you will say, oh, well, the wrestling, yeah, that makes sense, but what about dagger? Well, knife fighting is a messy subject. However, some training is better than no training, and while we don't walk around with huge 9 to 13 to 15-inch daggers, most people have, like I always have with me, some sort of pocket knife. Now, this is not anything big. This is nice and sharp, but it's Connecticut legal. I want to say it's just a hair under 4 inches, so it's like 3.5 inches, 3 3/4 inches. But so a lot of the dagger plays that we learn in HEMA aren't just stab the guy. There is a lot of that, and it's fun. But a lot of the techniques also involve using this as essentially a force multiplier. This is used to hook behind a knee, hook an elbow, behind the head, get any sort of, even just pulling somebody's arm or hand aside to get some sort of deflection. It just gives us a little extra control over another person, just gives us a little bit of grip on them. So that still applies, and it's not as easy as it would be with a longer dagger, but again, anything in a self-defense scenario, anything is better than nothing. If you look at one of our previous videos using the scissors hold, I could not quite get a scissors hold with this. There's not enough material there. However, the setup for the scissors hold could work. The simply coming across, hooking their wrist, and in this case, I would probably pull it down and maybe go for the elbow, get control somehow. But so some of the weapons or some of the principles of HEMA still will apply in a modern self-defense scenario, wrestling and dagger. But what about some of the other stuff? Like I said, you're not going to be carrying a poleaxe, a messer, a long sword, a sword and buckler. You're not going to be walking around with that. However, learning the techniques enough will give you the experience, give you that muscle memory of how to react with something in your hand. I know one of my students, one of my friends, I should say, has one of these self-defense umbrellas. Basically, it's just an umbrella that is made of some sort of super plastic material, so it's relatively indestructible. That's something that he brings around with him when he travels for work, and it's a very useful umbrella. And were he ever to get into some sort of problem, it would be very easy for him to use that as a messer. Obviously, it wouldn't cut, but the same kind of principles of taking somebody offline, striking, thrusting. After training for as long as he has, having something in his hand that is similar, it doesn't have to be exactly the steel fetter, the trainer, the plastic, whatever, but something in his hand if and when somebody were to assault him, his reaction would be automatic, and it would use whatever tool he happened to have, a pocket knife, an indestructible umbrella, whatever. Now, another important skill that maybe isn't explicitly called out, not like a certain technique, a certain system of wrestling or dagger work or sword work or anything, but in a sense, I would say a situational awareness. Just being aware of yourself and whatever's around you that comes from martial arts can also be used in modern self-defense. One thing we'll learn in not only weapon training, but even any kind of bare hand martial arts training is a sense of timing and measure. And while those aren't, fight enders in and of themselves, if you end up in a situation where you end up with a bar fight, maybe you said something wrong or you hit on the wrong girl and now her boyfriend is coming at you, who knows? However you end up in this situation, your sense of measure, timing, and distance can be used. Something that you would have, as a HEMA student, would have learned from sparring or drills, essentially how far away someone can be before they can hit you, how long it will take them to get to you, things like that, what kind of reach to expect out of a person. All these things that we train, not explicitly, but just as a matter of fact, can be essentially applied in modern self-defense. Getting used to figuring out how someone is going to move, their body language, the way the shoulders dip a little bit maybe before they come in with an attack, or very similar to something that we'll see in sparring. So you're training your body to see those signs and to figure that out. And this can be used, of course, in self-defense to intercept an attack, but it also can mean if someone is being aggressive towards you, you can read their body language, you can see the position that they're getting in, you can tell if they want to come in, close in to grapple with you, and you can move yourself just enough out of the way because you've done enough fighting that you know how to measure distance, kind of just do those mental calculations in your head. So you take a half a step back. Now they're still being aggressive, but you're just enough out of range that if they try to come at you, you have a little bit more time to do something against them. Now, one of the most important aspects, I think, of HEMA or any other traditional style martial arts training for modern self-defense is just mindset. The biggest risk that you can run into in a self-defense scenario is just freezing up, locking up, panicking, and not responding appropriately. That's where people get themselves in trouble. They've never faced something like this before, and they just freeze. Or they try to run away, or they just do something foolish. They just don't know any better. When the adrenaline hits, not everybody knows how to respond unless you've trained. If you've done plenty of in-class advanced drills and sparring, you know how the adrenaline goes up, and over time, over the course of years, you learn to channel that, to focus on that, to push past that, I want to just run away, or I want to just run into this, or whatever, and take a breath and calm yourself and control your reaction. At the same time, going on to the next level above just in-class sparring, going to tournaments, the same thing happens when you're suddenly in that tournament ring with another fighter and judges and people watching you. The adrenaline takes over, and the experience of doing that over and over and over again means that you learn to control yourself, you learn to control your environment, you learn to stay calm and not just lose control there. I know outside of HEMA stuff, I've done shooting sports, IDPA type action pistol matches, rifle matches, where you are, instead of just standing on a line shooting paper, you're moving actively through a course, having to do reloads and hitting multiple targets from different positions, sitting, standing, kneeling, laying down, sometimes all these in the same course. And I know I've done shooting plenty of times. I've shot thousands of rounds, and I can hit anything on a piece of paper, and it's no problem. The first time I went to one of those matches, I mean, again, after I've shot thousands of rounds of just standing in line shooting paper, the first time I'm at the match, I have my sidearm, holstered on my side, and I'm standing there waiting. I go up and I put my hands down on the table or whatever was set up to start the stage, and the safety officer is standing next to me, and I'm starting to get a little shaky. I can feel it, and I'm waiting and waiting and waiting, and I hear the buzzer go to let me know it's time to start. And again, this is not a self-defense. This is just going out for fun and doing these competitions with a bunch of friends. And the adrenaline just spikes, and everything just slows down for me, and everything just starts kind of, moving like it's through Jello. It's all slow, and I can't really hear anything. I know there's people behind me, but I suddenly can't hear their conversations. I get that intense focus, and afterwards, after that first time, I'm shaking a little bit still from all that adrenaline. After doing it more and more, that starts to go away. And the same thing happens with this. Obviously, were you in a situation where someone is actively mugging you, assaulting you, it's not the same as any sort of tournament or sparring lesson or drilling or any of this kind of stuff. But that adrenaline response is still there. It'll be more extreme in a self-defense scenario, of course, yes, but it's the same feeling. It's that same thing. So having experienced that and having learned to fight through that and fight through that well means that were you ever to get in one of those situations, which I hope all of you viewers never have to, never are in a situation where someone is attacking you, but if you ever are, you won't go into a panic mode with any luck, with some training. You won't instantly just panic and freeze and get that adrenaline start shaking because you've done it before. You've been there. Your brain goes, oh, we're doing that fight thing. Okay, we've done this before. Let's see, what can we do? Can we run away? Okay, there's not really a way to run away. But let's see. Okay, they're stepping in closer to us. We know if someone is that close, that means that they could hit us or they could grapple with us. So we know. So all these things kind of come together. And yes, like I said right at the beginning, HEMA may not, if you are looking to learn self-defense for modern street fighting, HEMA is not going to be the #1 source. However, it's not useless. If you get high enough level, if you get enough experience, you can definitely use the same kind of fighting and tactics, the skills that you would learn in a HEMA class, and in any sort of real fight scenario. If you ever think you're going to get into a real street fight, I will say, don't try to learn knife work. Don't try to learn grappling work. Obviously, if you have the chance, do learn anything. Martial arts are fun, but get a gun. I love swords. I love medieval fighting. I love archery. I love all these kind of combat sports. I love wrestling, but when it comes to actual real-world self-defense, if someone is coming at you, all the kung fu in the world is nothing compared to a 45 or a 9mm. You want to, in a real-world scenario, end an assailant as fast as you can. Stop them with as much force as possible, as soon as possible. And firearms are kind of the way to go for that. That's not an option for everybody. Maybe you don't have a firearm on you at the time. Maybe you haven't had a chance to draw a firearm yet. That's where some of the other martial arts training comes in handy. If someone comes in at you, you can isolate a limb, put them in a chicken wing, whatever, while still having your main weapon, whether it's a knife or a gun or whatever, holstered. You can still learn to defend yourself. Now, one thing I did want to say is some of this is, of course, speculation. I will say that, yes. There's 1,000 scenarios we can come up with in our heads about this or that, and 1,000 different scenarios of what to do and ways to counter this and that, and a lot of this is in hypotheticals. Without going into crazy details, I have been in a few, nothing life-threatening, but I have been in scenarios where I've applied martial arts skills on people, and it's definitely, like I said, a tunnel vision adrenaline rush when you're there, but in the time, you don't have time to think about, okay, well, I'm going to use this technique. You simply react. I'll say, too, that even some people, not only in our chapter, but in some of the other chapters of the Sila Harfekshula, the different branches that we have all over the country. I know one of the, I believe, students, or maybe even one of the assistant instructors in Alaska, had been attacked years ago and used some of the dagger training, I believe. I don't know all the words. I hear it secondhand from people, but he used some of the dagger training techniques against somebody that came at him, and he took what he knew from class, and it just channeled when he was presented with a threat. One of my friends and longtime training partners lived in one of the not as nice cities in Connecticut, and he was jumped by a couple guys one day walking home from work, and he actually used one of the wrestling techniques to really quickly throw one of the guys on the ground. One of the basic wrestling principles. I think it was third wrestling. It might have been first wrestling, but I believe it was he just simply used a first wrestling on somebody, and then did the #1 self-defense technique in the world, which is run away really, really fast. And he just ran away and got to a better area and got himself home. But he was able to, when he was initially approached, use some of these skills that he's learned in class. And again, just for, you know, privacy and everything, one of my students actually came to me recently and said that they used one of the basic principles that we had done in sort of a, maybe it wasn't a life-threatening scenario, but they were assaulted and they used the training we did in class. In this case, we had a few classes prior, we had some extra time and we were doing some dagger techniques. And in class, we were doing a simple downward stab with the dagger, followed by setting aside with the left hand and the triangle disarm. Side note, I like to sweeten the technique a little bit with that from some of my other grappling background before I got into HEMA, of not coming up, getting the upsets in against the incoming dagger. As I come down to get that triangle disarm to pop the dagger from their hands, I like to try to control the wrist as I come over. Maybe we'll make a video of that one of these days. That's a fun little technique. So instead of just simply pushing them aside, you can get a little control on their wrist and take the dagger out of their hand, which is, you know, just a little extra. But so we were working on that in class, just the principle of incoming attack to your upper left, creating cover, and bringing it down to the side. So when one of my students was attacked, it wasn't, of course, with a dagger, but someone had thrown a very kind of sloppy haymaker-style punch at them, and instinctively, when they saw that strike coming in, they came up and created a defense with this arm, and in one motion took them down, and they were able to de-escalate the situation because they took that person coming in at them and just stopped that initial punch, and then pulled the person across them and actually sent the person this way past them, where, of course, now they're safe. So I guess kind of the conclusion is, if you are out there to learn self-defense for a modern context, and that is your main focus, HEMA is not your thing. Historic European fighting is not going to be something you're going to use. Medieval or Renaissance fighting is not something you're going to use in modern context in street fights. However, if you are a student of one of these arts, it doesn't mean that your skills don't apply. God forbid you ever end up in one of those situations, but let your training take over. Trust your training and trust that your body over time knows how to respond to pressure coming in at you, and don't freak out and panic and freeze in place, and do whatever it is that fits for what you know. And, you know, of course, good luck. So thanks for watching, everybody. If you'd like to see more of these, let me know. I was thinking about doing a few other, essentially, lectures, as I like hearing myself talk. I don't know about the rest of you, but I have a few other subjects that are, you know, maybe some history side of things, things that I've learned about HEMA. I've done lectures and presentations at schools and things, so maybe doing that for the YouTube channel might be interesting. I also was going to do a few other topics like this, talking about essentially, not specifically HEMA as a self-defense, but what I would kind of call controversial European martial arts, Western martial arts issues. So I'll go and kind of give at least my opinion of some of these things. And hopefully soon, hopefully sooner than later, the snow will be gone and we can get back outside and do a little more filming outside and do, of course, more longsword, messer, dagger, and we're looking at getting a bunch more of the poleaxe video content out there, because I know a lot of people are interested in that from what I've seen. So again, thanks for watching. Please visit our website at www.laurelcitysword.com for more information on our classes. And of course, like, share, subscribe our video. And I guess very important to today's subject of self-defense, rule number 1, don't get stabbed.